So, few activists ever get the opportunity to see beyond the Bangor fence, much less to witness the evil that resides there. In many ways, it's a Potemkin. The base is an idyllic park-like community with facilities for the military families, children. But make no mistake, the sole purpose of the base is the maintenance, storage, and deployment of nuclear weapons. So, Ground Zero commissioned this billboard in downtown Seattle in 2021. Its purpose is to illustrate the proximity of nuclear weapons, over 1,100 nuclear warheads and their launchers, to where we live. It's the largest concentration of deployed nuclear weapons in the Western Hemisphere, maybe the world, and it's 20 miles from downtown Seattle. Deployed warheads refers to about 600 warheads that are physically loaded on board Trident II D5 missiles on the 8 ballistic missile submarines that are home ported at Bangor. That's not all the warheads that are there. That's the ones that are deployed and could be launched at very short notice. Those missiles are capable of reaching all of Russia and China from patrol areas in the Northern Pacific. And if the unimaginable occurred, could even be launched from the Hood Canal and still reach their targets. So, oh, I have too many mice. There we go. This is an overview of the base. North is to the right. The water at the top is the Hood Canal. You can read the statistics on the slide. The southern third of the base, where I've got the cursor going now, is the Potemkin. This is where the sailors and the Marines and their families live. There's 2 housing areas, one right up here, another over here. They're really well maintained, lots of playground facilities. There's hundreds of kids. My wife and I ride our bikes around the housing areas because the roads are wide and nobody goes more than 25 miles an hour because there's so many kids. The buildings down in here are the community area. There's a grocery store, a PX, gym, gas station. There's a few restaurants and clubs. It's really a self-contained community. Right over here is what looks like a quadrangle of college dorms, and that's the bachelor housing. The sailors that are unmarried that choose to live on the base or can't afford to live off the base. And it's a regular little community. Again, they got medical facilities, fire stations, police department. They even have over here a really nice lake that's got fish in it, and it's a recreation area, picnics. Great. This place, this 7,300 acres is a perfect site for a green technological campus. The northern 2/3, on the other hand, all this up here is all about nuclear weapons. And folks who have no business up here, cannot go there. There's a gate right here that was put up in the early 2000s after 2001 to restrict access. And so the only people who can go north of this gate are people who have business there. So we're going to pan to the Trident operations area, and that's what it's all about. There's several landmarks. This is the Strategic Weapons Facility Pacific, where the warheads and missiles are stored. Straight down here is the IMF, or Intermediate Maintenance Facility, where the submarines are repaired. The components are taken here, or there's just a load of shipyard workers, really, who go over to the submarines and fix them. IMF employs the largest number of people on the base. Delta Pier is where the submarines moor when they're in port. And then on the far right are the explosive handling wharfs, where the warheads and missiles are loaded in and out of the submarines. And look at that, down in the lower half left-hand corner is ground zero. We've got 350 feet of fence that borders the base. Actually, the base has 350 feet, 330 feet of fence that borders us. It's not our fence. But Kathy and Bill, our caretakers, have planted sunflowers along the fence, and we hang peace cranes there when the Spirit moves us. There's ground zero as it looks today. If you haven't been there, stop by. It's a beautiful place, especially in the spring. So the next landmark, where the arrow is up here, is the Delta Pier. And the Delta Pier is a pier that is moored to the bottom on pilings. It's not a floating pier. You can see there are 3 submarines at the 2 mooring locations. And then this area along the bottom here is a dry dock that accommodates a Trident submarine. You can see there's a crane there. Trident submarines come in here and moor alongside for 3 to 4 weeks between their patrols. They refit the ship, they load stores, and when they're done, they'll go out into the Hood Canal and do some sea trials. Then they spend 10 to 12 weeks at sea and repeat the cycle with a second crew. These are 2 cruise submarines, so they spend like 70% of their time at sea, but the sailors don't spend that much time on the ship. That's what a Trident looks like, this cartoon. Looks like you can float it in your bathtub. Here's some specifications. It's impossible to convey how big these ships are until you've seen one out of the water in a dry dock. The distance here from the keel to the top of the sail is 75 feet. That is over a 7-story building high. 18,000 plus tons. These are the biggest ships, combatant ships in the U.S. Navy, except for aircraft carriers and a few of the big deck amphibs that look like aircraft carriers. 18 of these were built between 1976 and 1997. The first 4 have been converted to guided missile submarines. They don't carry nuclear weapons. So now there are 14 ballistic missile submarines. 8 of them are at Bangor and 6 are at Kings Bay, Georgia. Each Trident was built with 24 missile tubes. 4 tubes were deactivated on each ballistic missile submarine to comply with New START restrictions on the number of deployed launchers. 20 missiles. Each missile can carry up to 8 90 kiloton W-76 warheads, or 475 kiloton W-88 warheads. In order to meet the New START restrictions, each missile carries on average 4 to 5 warheads, and that's where we get the 90 warheads that is in the spec there. They can carry a lot more than that. They can carry 8 times 9 is 8. How do you do that? How do you do arithmetic? 8 times 160. Okay. But they don't. The total stockpile of warheads includes about 384 of the W-88s, the big guys, and 1,500 of the W-76-1s, and then a small number, about 24 W-76-2, which are the low-yield warheads that were deployed during the Trump administration. So today, about half of the submarine warheads are deployed on ballistic missile submarines, and about half are considered strategic reserve, and they're in storage at strategic weapons facilities, both at Kings Bay and at Bangor. Whatever the total numbers are, about 60% of that is at Bangor. So that's where we get the number of there's 1,100 plus warheads at Bangor. And this slide is from my metric friends. And so we thought it'd be cool once Bangor is closed down and it's a peace park that we would tow one of the submarines and put it at ground zero. So this is an overhead view of what it would look like. 560 feet long. Puts for those who have been to ground zero, you know what a very large tract of land we are on. But 560 feet puts the screw out in Clear Creek Road, and the bow is over the Bangor fence. They are immense, and their height is at treetop level for some really beautiful old cedars and Doug firs that are on the property. Look at the picture. You can see the ground zero house and how tiny it is next to this submarine. Many naval officers have described them to me as national treasures. I don't agree with that, but that's the way people think about them. So moving off the waterfront, the arrow now is pointing at SwiftPack, and this is the high security area where the warheads and missiles enter and leave the base. Warheads go on and off with armored trucks, and the missile motors go by rail because they're just too big to go on trucks. There is a limited area that the security guards call the wire. They say they go inside the wire for a week. And that is this perimeter here. And this is the high security area where all of the stuff is stored. Despite this perimeter, in 2009, 5 plowshares activists, they managed to get inside the inner fence and then surrendered to the security forces. That was Bix and company, 2 priests, a nun, and 2 grandmothers. Since then, the Navy has spent over, listen, $1.2 billion to keep old people out of the strategic weapons facility. $1.2 billion to harden the perimeter. There are several underground bunkers over in here. Missile motors are stored in these bunkers, and individual warheads in these bunkers. And then there is a new facility that the cursor is on here, and that's a underground storage facility that was built in 2015. It goes several stories down into the ground, and it is the single place where the warheads go when they're transferred either from a submarine or to a submarine for their inspections. There's capacity in here for about 1,200 warheads, but most are dispersed out in the individual bunkers I showed you. Armored vehicles transport the warheads to and from the waterfront, and separately, transporter trucks transport the missiles to and from the waterfront. The warheads are removed from the missiles before the missiles are pulled out of the submarine, and that's a safety thing that was implemented many years ago when they figured out that the missiles are vulnerable to small arms fire and would blow up, and it's not cool to blow up a missile with nuclear weapons on top of it. And that is probably more than you wanted to know about Bangor. So I got time. I think we have time for a few specific questions about that for now, and then we can go on to the next presentation. And I'll come out of screen share so I can address a few questions.
So questions, people.
Or I did such a good job that nobody has any.
I have a question. This is John Rep. I don't know much about atomic weapons, but I thought TNT was used to compress the uranium until there's a chain reaction, but isn't TNT somewhat can be unstable? So how do you deal with that?
So inside the warhead, there are high explosives that compress the primary of the weapon. It's not TNT, it's something more compact and more sophisticated. And there's many charges that surround what's called the plutonium pit. And that's the primary of the weapon. And in a and that gives you about 10 kilotons of destructive power. But the other thing it gives you is a high pressure and high temperature, and that ignites the secondary, which makes it a thermonuclear weapon. And that's where the rest of the yield comes from. So we're talking the W88 is 475 kilotons. Most of that is a fusion reaction, but that can't happen until you have the primary atomic reaction from the plutonium pit. And that's more than you needed to know.
Okay,
Mary,
Roger, Tom.
Mary's next.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Raise your hand if you will, and then we can keep order. Mary?
Want to point out that in today's Seattle Times, there's an article about earthquake preparedness, and it doesn't show the fact that there are earthquake faults up close to and in that area. So this is more of a statement. Tom, what's your assessment of how insane it is to have nuclear weapons stored and handled in an area that has a significant, two different significant earthquake sources, one being the one that, the big one, the Cascadian, anyway, the one that's way out in the ocean, and the other one that's more land-based. It's sometimes called the, anyway, I don't want to get technical about it, but there are two different.
Well, I think that I'm not going to be apologetic on this one, but the probability of a nuclear detonation as a result of an earthquake is so small that it's negligible. You can't detonate a nuclear weapon by breaking it or shaking it or sinking it or any of those things that would happen in a mechanical shock that's associated with a earthquake. On the other hand, if there was an earthquake, it would damage the submarines and basically put them out of action for a while. But that doesn't really matter either, because there are so many submarines that are at sea and so few submarines that are in port at any given time. So yeah, that I agree that that's a dumb place to store your nuclear weapons, but that's a decision that was made 50 years ago, and nobody's going to change that now.
Yeah.
Oh, except maybe to remove them all forever.
I'm kind of getting to that one. I'm just saying it makes it a target more than anything. I'm just saying the fact, not the seismic risk so much, but the chaos of an earthquake in the area isn't good. But there is a 1 in 10 chance that we'll have the big one within the next 50 years. So this is not insignificant. So that I have a lot of concerns about it, not a nuclear explosion as in, you know, setting off a nuclear weapon, but a possibility of a lot of what you'd call a dirty bomb, or a release of radioactive stuff if there's an earthquake. I don't want to go on and on about it. It's a concern that I've had for a long time, but the fact that that the base is there and that such a concentration does make it a target in the case of a inadvertent or planned nuclear attack. In the case of nuclear war, this is probably one of the
Oh yeah, for sure. Yep.
So, okay.
I agree.
Rosie?
Most people probably have asked this question in the past, and it's, Tom, would you please just compare the Hiroshima bomb to the ones that are on the submarine?
Sure. The Hiroshima bomb was around 12 kiloton, and there are two warheads that are on the submarines, a 90 kiloton and a 475 kiloton. However, it's an oversimplification to say that a 475 kiloton is 40 times more destructive than a 12 kiloton. Is that the right number? Whatever it is. 12 kiloton weapons would be a lot more destructive than one 475 kiloton, because the 475 kiloton weapon is concentrated in one place, and you vaporize a larger area, but it's still a relatively small area. You vaporize 20 miles instead of 2 miles. And so I really dislike using that measure of the equivalent of 40 Hiroshimas. They say, I see one all the time that says a Trident submarine carries the equivalent of 1,200 Hiroshima bombs. But that's just not really true. Take that for what it's worth. It's just it's not a comparison I like.
Tom, I have a question about when you were talking about transporting these in armored vehicles and stuff. So where are they coming from in the country?
The Trident II D5 life extension program is, I think, almost over. And what that program was a modernization of every missile and every warhead on every submarine. And what that means is every missile and every warhead from every submarine was removed from that submarine and trucked or railed to the Pantex fabrication plant in Amarillo, Texas, which is where all that work goes on. And every one of those warheads, 1,000 of them, 2,000, I guess, total warheads, went to Amarillo. And I don't know how many missiles, hundreds of missiles went to Amarillo and were essentially rebuilt and then reassembled at Bangor and Kings Bay and loaded back on the submarines. Obviously, the trucks they don't have a sign on the side that says "Caution: Nuclear Weapons on Board," but you can bet that they are escorted and they have designated routes, and that their drivers aren't allowed to stop at truck stops for a shower and a beer. But yeah, they go on roads.
It's hard to believe, given all the train accidents in the last month.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that there hasn't been an accident along the way. I mean, we just wouldn't know about it, right?
We wouldn't know about it. Yeah. I don't think so. There's no evidence that anything has happened. And when you consider, all of the stuff that was transported, and all of the weapons handling that occurred at both Bangor and Kings Bay. And that's why they built